Get ready. Hold tight. It's
Hold on to
happening.
your hats, boys.
Libos.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Wednesday Week.
A little bit old.
Without deep into Danny Roll, please don't clip that.
Been truly horrific having this season away from home.
I want to go.
Anyone would think that we rehearse this, and I guarantee that we haven't.
How poor do we have to be before it's happened? How much blood from this stone does he have to get?
For Wednesday Week! Hello, good evening once again. My name is Dan Fudge, and I'm talking to you on Hello from the Other Side edition. Talking to Connor Southwell, talking about Norwich City in... Yes, Connor, how are you getting on, pal? Long time no speak. I think you've been my counterpart for Norwich City for about 2 or 3 years now. How are you getting on, pal? You all right?
Always a pleasure, Dan. Always a pleasure. I'm very well. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, not so bad. Not so bad. It's I was just looking at the form table for the upcoming teams, and I was looking at Norwich City's form, and that's 4 draws out of the last 5 with a big win against Hull City 4-0. But I'm looking at this, and you've not failed to score in any of these games, so it should be a right old ding dong coming up, right?
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, there's a hell of a lot going on at Norwich at the moment, namely around injuries. There seems to be, I don't know what they do in the autumn, whether it's the manner in which they pick pumpkins or something, some sort of curse. But it happened last season. It's happened again. There's a lot of injuries. There's, I think, 8 or 9 players out for this game, and a lot of those are frontline players who would be starting as well. And from Josh Sergent, obviously, number 9, who I think is probably the all-rounder, the best all-rounder up front, to Marcelino Nunez in midfield, to Angus Gunn in goal. There's a lot of players missing. So some of that has probably contributed to the form, because after that Hull win, I think maybe a lot of Norwich fans felt that Johannes Off-Torp, his style of play, the way that they want to go forward, all of that had been sort of cracked, and it was done. And, not the league title was sewed up, but there was a lot of kind of hype around Norwich City. And yeah, suddenly I think reality is bit ever so slightly with some pretty grave injury news.
It's interesting, though, because the league table is still insane. I mean, I know November and December is when people start looking at it, but you guys are what, 10th, not that far off of the playoffs. I mean, what was the expectations in the summer before the season kicked off?
Yeah, good question, because obviously Norwich finished 6th last year, so this is maybe slightly I'll try and make it a brief answer, but it might become a little bit elongated. But Norwich finished in the playoffs last year under David Wagner. I think we probably had a conversation last year about David Wagner, and there, you look at it on paper and you look at the job that he did and where Norwich finished, and they obviously finished 6th, and objectively that's a good result for any team to get inside the playoffs. It's what basically every team in the division aspires to do. So the fact that Norwich City did it, particularly from the position they were in, again, because of injuries last November, where they fell as low as 17th, it was a remarkable turnaround. But yet there was still a lot of unhappiness at the club because of the style of play, because of the lack of young players. They were playing with a team of an average age of 30 at one stage, and that's historically not really what Norwich City have done. So there was a lot of unhappiness, even when they were winning and went on a mega run, particularly at home. And so there's probably been a little bit of a reset of the club in the summer to try and, I guess, build again a little bit of an identity, which is what Daniel Farke did and Stuart Webber did during his time at the club. And they kind of moved away from that because of failures in the Premier League and a few other different things, and got a little bit lost. We're a bit like a teenager looking in the mirror, and suddenly you've got odd hairs growing and you're not quite sure why or where or what you are. So I think now they've got a new sporting director, Ben Napper, who's come in and identified Johannes Off-Torp from the Danish Super League, who nobody here and probably nowhere anywhere else in the UK had ever heard of or knew much about. And he's come in and trying to play a really attractive style. And as I said, it was beginning to look like they were getting there. There was progression. They were winning games comfortably against some good sides. Hull is the game that you mentioned. They won. They beat them 4-0. But Watford they beat. They've drawn against Sheffield United, against Leeds, against Middlesbrough, Blackburn, who have started the season really well as well. So there's been some really good results in there. Performances have probably been better than the results, I would say, overall. And so all of that probably added up to expectation was going to be a little bit up and down. I think there's in terms of expectation, it's not the same levels that it's been in the last few years from a Norwich City perspective, because I think there's recognition that they're transitioning to something new. And
Yeah.
we all know when we mention transition, it comes with patience and time and all of that type of thing. And they've still got a lot of
all of those things that football fans are renowned for. Patience. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't be reactionary. All of this type of thing. And it never lasts in the short term. But that's what they're trying to be. They're trying to transition to something new, and maybe get a bit of that identity back. So I think the feeling was that this was going to be a year that was up and down. I think after what happened with that whole victory, the last international break was spent sort of wondering if maybe we'd spoken them down too much and whether they were a little bit better than what we thought. But I think since the return of football after that October break with the injuries, I think reality is biting a little bit. That this may well be the sort of up and down season that we all expected.
But looking at the league table, and I'm, it's an odd league table to look at, because in 9th and 10th, right, you've got yourselves and Bristol City, who looking at the form guide, essentially, you've got all these draws with a couple of wins peppered in the pair of you, and like there's an expectation where like Norwich, you could argue they're underperforming, but Bristol City fans are sat there going, wait, are we good now? Is that what's happening? It's weird how the perception changes between the club, because Norwich are renowned for being one of those players that have got it in them to get out of this league. Now, did I read that Delia's on her way out, or she moved upstairs? What's the story with Delia?
Gone. She's resigned from the board of directors, and Norwich are in the process of being bought by Mark Atanasio, who is, for any baseball fans, is the principal, I think they call it over there, of Milwaukee Brewers. So he owns Milwaukee Brewers, which is a baseball club. He first got involved a couple of years ago, actually, sort of at the back end of a Premier League season, came on the board, and it's been kind of a slow process probably to him taking the club, as Delia and Michael sort of looked at them and they looked at the club and whatnot. And now, obviously, because of financial reasons, parachute payments have gone. There's a lot of debt that they've sort of taken on and internalized, and there's a lot of sort of politics to it. But that basically meant that they've now stood down. It's not formally done, so the process in which the shares become what they call it, like in force, is March. So they're still technically co-majority shareholders, but they're no longer on the board, and that is going to happen on March the 1st. So for all extent and purposes, Delia and Michael are no more. Well, they are still, but they are life presidents now instead of majority shareholders. So it's more of a sort of it's a slightly different role. Yeah.
Wow, that seems like she seems to have been in that club as long as I can remember football. I must admit, I'm kind of like looking back thinking of pre-Delia Norwich City. That's absolutely incredible. So
27 years, which is
how long it's been?
It is, It was 90. So I think it was 97 that they joined the board, and 98 that they became sort of the majority shareholders. So that's longer than I've been alive, and it's remarkable. I think in general, really, in football, you just don't get people who stay in the game that long. So irrespective maybe of what Norwich fans thought of her towards the end, and whether they felt that maybe she took a little bit too long to sell up, I think it's hard not to look at those two and feel anything but appreciation for the job they've done over nearly 30 years. And, it's always interesting coming on these shows, because a lot of the time Norwich City is Delia Smith, and that's kind of people's reference point, that and Alan Partridge maybe to an extent. But she's done a wonderful job, and I think most Norwich fans have probably agreed that it's a good time for her to maybe put her feet up and enjoy watching some football, as opposed to worrying about debt and sort of all the financial stuff.
That's genuinely incredible. I like you touched upon it then about looking back at the tenure of Delia and Michael at the club. Surely when you look back on it on the whole, and the amount of times you've been in and out of the Premier League and the ups and downs you've had, I mean, it's not always been easy, don't get me wrong, but I tell you what, it's been a hell of a ride, hasn't it?
Oh, it's been brilliant. And I think particularly in the current footballing climate, where we all know what the Premier League is like, it's difficult. As somebody who's experienced it with Norwich, and I think our dear friends in Suffolk are probably experiencing it now. And your guys, dear friends, have as well. It's not a particularly fun place to be. It's difficult, and often the journey is better than the destination when it comes to that. And I think the fact that you look at clubs, and I don't want to put Sheffield Wednesday in here, but I probably will, and Derby and whatnot, who have spent a reasonable amount of money trying to pursue that dream. The fact that Norwich City have done it really as a self-finance club. It's not been a case of throwing money at it every time. They've constantly punched above their weight, I think, from a financial basis. I mean, those two were among sort of the poorest, richest owners in the Championship.
Yeah.
So the fact that, yeah, like you say, they've had so many top flight seasons, even if they haven't quite worked out when they've got there, I think is, incredibly impressive.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the upcoming game. It's going to be tomorrow evening when we're recording this, so a lot of people will probably listen to this in the morning. So tonight's game, it's a long way to go for a Tuesday night. Do you feel that might be an issue for the players? Is there a degree of trepidation, given that we had our backsides handed to us by Watford the other day, but then prior to that we put a really good performance in against Brentford in the Cup? I mean, at the risk of sounding cliche, you never know what Sheffield Wednesday is going to turn up. Have you got that same with your team, or do you feel like you're a bit more settled now? You know the ball's hitting the onion bag and you can't keep them out at your own end.
Yeah, so again, I think there's a lot to this. I think this is a very difficult game for Norwich. I think if we were being honest, probably one that they don't want or need at this moment in time, because I mentioned the injury list is as bad as it is, and it's 9 now. And I looked after the weekend when it was 8 out. They've lost another player as well between those games. It's only Burnley who have got as many players out as that in the entire Championship. And again, we're talking all 9 players probably would be in a match day squad if they were fit and available. And the context as well of that is it's left players like Jakob Sørensen, for example, who had to start on Saturday, had to play 75 minutes. That was his first start. He'd been out since opening day of the season. They were playing 2 teenagers in the team. There's a few sort of 20, 21-year-olds. There's a lad who is called Antti Sienats up front, who they spent a decent whack of money on, but he's been playing out wide and hadn't played sort of centrally. So there's a whole lot of context as to why this one is difficult for them. That, coupled with the context of what you had there, I think everyone probably expects a reaction from Sheffield Wednesday. Norwich, historically, I know that how much these things matter or not, but historically, I don't think of Hillsborough as a particularly happy hunting ground for Norwich. So it's going to be tough, and I think there's recognition of how tough it's going to be, and I think most of a Norwich City persuasion would absolutely snap your hand off for a point at this moment in time, to be honest. And so the thing about Saturday's game was away to Cardiff, and you mentioned the travel. I mean, I don't know who's done the scheduling. I don't know if this has been the same from your guys' perspective, and maybe it's been the reverse, but 4 of the last 5 games for Norwich City have been away, and they've been like long trips. We've had Preston a couple of Tuesdays ago. We were at Cardiff on Saturday. We were at Sheffield Wednesday, and everywhere's far from Norfolk, isn't it? But to have those in such a short period of time over basically a 4-game period is not ideal. So yeah, all of those factors probably make this not an ideal game, not an ideal occasion. I know you guys have got a big game coming up at the weekend as well. So whether that conversely kind of works in Norwich's favour, I don't know, but we'll see. I think add that all to the melting pot, and you're right, it is a bit like, what the hell do you expect from this
exactly
one?
That, and there's always goals as well, I think,
Yeah.
between Sheffield Wednesday and Norwich. I mean, was it last season where you guys were 2-0 up, and then we brought on Michael Smith to just be a presence in the box, and we just hoofed it to the big lad, went old school on it, went Sunday League on it, Connor. But then you touched upon the following weekend as well. Obviously, we've got Deschamps Bernard, who's one booking away from a suspension, and obviously we don't want to lose him for the derby. So you may see Deschamps Bernard rested, who's our big centre back, who's our top boy. I won't go as far as stature big, but one of our more gifted players. But then at the weekend, you yourselves have got Bristol City at home that we mentioned earlier on. And I know it's too early to start talking about 6-pointers, but a 6-pointer for me is teams that are in close proximity of each other, where a win will feel like you've had 6 points. That's where the phrase comes from, as far as my understanding of it. Do you feel like there's a case of let's just get through this game tomorrow night unscathed, and then let's put one in against Norwich at Bristol City at the weekend?
To an extent, I think my mindset is basically just get through to the international break now unscathed, because they've got so many players out that they need to get back. It's I mean, I'm actually going to take my boots to Hillsborough tomorrow night, because it's that bad at the moment. You never know if you get called upon. It's so I think there's probably a little bit about that from the next 2 games. But you're right, they've had so many draws, and whilst they've got so many players out, you can sit there and make it an excuse, or you can try and sort of run towards adversity, I guess, and try and make something of it. To be fair, they did that at Cardiff. They were the better team for 75 minutes, and then just completely ran out of juice and options and depth and whatnot, and conceded 2 goals in stoppage time. So from a Sheffield Wednesday perspective, I think if I was Danny Royal at the minute, I'd be thinking, right, if you can keep Norwich in a game for 75 minutes, then there's a real opportunity for you in the last quarter of the game to nick something, be it a point or be it free, because it's a depleted Norwich team running on absolute fumes. So there's an opportunity for you guys, and I think there is an element also of just get it back to Carrow Road, take a point, try and get it back to Carrow Road, and see if you can beat Bristol City on Saturday. They're unbeaten at Carrow Road now for a year, which is a mega statistic. And yeah, I think there's maybe a little, as you guys know, there's probably a little bit more comfort playing at home. So I think if they can get through tomorrow unscathed, then hopefully they can maximise the opportunity that they have on Saturday against Bristol City, who, you know, as you've mentioned, are a really good team. So yeah, 2 big tests. It'd be interesting to see if any of those players sort of put their hand up and stand out, who maybe haven't so far and have been sort of in the wings, so to speak, rather than front and centre of the stage. So yeah, it's not ideal, this one, I don't think, from a Norwich perspective.
So what are you saying, the score prediction then to wrap it up?
Oh, it could be anything. Could be absolutely anything.
Honestly, I think we put a graphic out and I'm thinking like 3-3. I'm genuinely it could be a Desmond.
I had 3-3 in my head, actually. I had 3-3 in my head, actually.
In fact, this was the only time, I think it was you and me last season where we said Desmond, didn't we? We called it last season, I remember. Yeah. And 3-3. That's what we're going for, Connor. Let's do it. Connor, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you so much for joining me. I enjoy how concise you are. There's no farting around the poo. Big fun. Thanks a lot, pal.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Every week, live from 8 p.m. It's the Wednesday Week. Bringing you football analysis.
He came in. I think he scored a goal.
Bringing you banter.
Yeah.
Bringing you responsible life hacks.
Met you wonderful souls at 10 a.m. for some shots.
The Wednesday Week. 1, 2, 3, 4 live. Available on all social medias.
Obviously, this goes out on YouTube and as well as all the other social media out there for podcasts, etc.
The Wednesday Week 24-25 season. Join us.
Put on your podcast.